It's a little bit too loud, maybe lower the microphone a little bit. I was trying to choose a picture to show you while we started. And I was going to put you a nice sunshine with a beautiful beach. But I thought, no, this is Iceland, they like ice. So I took you one from Canada that I took a few years ago. I'm very glad that you're here. It's been a very busy year for myself. I have already been in 22 countries. Just a few days ago, I was actually in New Zealand, from all places. And the level of interest for this type of topic keeps on growing. Because this is a problem that is not decreasing, but is increasing. And you're going to learn a lot during this time. And I hope that you took some paper and notes so you can take some notes about it. And something that I want to do just before starting, I want to do a little bit of background. First of all, I wanted to share with you my Twitter account. I keep this account quite active. I put usually the latest information if you're interested in the field of lifestyle medicine. And keep the latest on that. And also have a YouTube account. I just warn you, most of the material in this YouTube account is in Spanish. Snackeroo Spanish. So don't get scared. There's a few videos there in English if you dig around. I just wanted to tell you where I'm coming from. I originally studied computer science. Ever since I was a kid, I loved computers. And I finished my computer science degree. And after I finished, it happened to be that my brother was taking a class in a place that is called a lifestyle center. A lifestyle center is a place that you go there and for 2 weeks they give you the good food, they give you a massage, they take you for walks, they teach you how to relax. I mean, the whole package. There in parentheses, that's where I'm coming from. I came from Norway. Giving a series of seminars there. I was in a lifestyle center. In parentheses, it's actually quite close to you guys if you ever want a good lifestyle center. The name of that lifestyle center is called Fredheim. The website is fredheim.org if you want to check it out, what do they offer there in Norway. But anyhow, I went to visit my brother that was studying in a lifestyle center. And that lifestyle center was located in Southern California. And my plan was to continue with my computer science degree. I had already been accepted to get a master's in computer science program. And I had a scholarship to go for it, so my plans were to go there. Well, I come here to visit my brother. And in the meanwhile, they had all kinds of computer problems at that place. There was nobody that knew computers, and it was just a whole mess. So they heard that I had studied computer science, so they asked for my help, and in 1 week I solved all their major issues there in their computers. And the doctor in charge was very surprised, and he said, would you consider joining our team here? It was a big decision for me to take. I had already been accepted for my master's program, and at the same time, they were inviting me to join them. And after many difficult situations, I decided actually to go ahead and join them. And you know, my life changed completely. When I saw what was happening there, people that were diabetic were reversing their problem. People with severe arthritis, their problem finally came under control. People with high blood pressure were coming under control. People with severe obesity, they were losing weight at the right rate. So after seeing that, I said, you know, computers are very nice, but this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And that's why I went ahead and later on I studied medicine, and my desire has always been to try to find the cause of the problem. Just medicating things in the outside doesn't solve absolutely anything. I also had experience later on of moving to South Dakota. You know that place where they have that mountain with the president heads? Have you seen that one? Rushmore? 15 minutes from there. That was another lifestyle center. I was working there for many years. Also, I was working with Dr. Sang Lee, an extremely famous physician from Korea. We were doing lifestyle programs in Hawaii. And then in Norway, I spent many years. I happen to actually speak Norwegian. This is the famous Fredheim. After 10 years that I left that place, I came back to that place. And I've been involved in publishing quite a bit lately. This is a paper that we presented in a very important congress in a major university in Southern California. In this particular study, we were demonstrating how high cholesterol can go down within 2 weeks without medication. How do we do that? Changing the diet. Trying to find the origin of the problem. Many people think that they have high cholesterol because they have bad luck. That's not true. Bad luck is going to be for your pocket for repaying the medication. But if you change your diet, cholesterol will come down in most of the cases. And this article in particular, we're going to focus a lot on the information on this article. This article was an extremely important article in which we were demonstrating what are the causes of depression. What are the real causes of depression? In fact, when we published this article in the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine, it's called this journal. If you want to get this article, you actually pay to make it open. So you just have to type 2 words in your browser. Type the word Nedley and type the word hypothesis. If you type these 2 words, it's the first hit that comes up there. And you can go ahead and read it online for free. Also, we presented this paper at the International Congress on Diabetes in Washington, D.C. In this paper, we were showing that a plant-rich diet is one of the best ways of controlling a diabetes. Okay? And a very, very good reception we had on that. And extremely good reception we had with this paper. This paper we presented at the topmost Congress on Addictions last December in Miami, Florida. In this paper, we were showing how people that are using benzodiazepines, these are the type of medications commonly used for problems like anxiety, things like the alprazolam and all their near cousins. Sometimes it's also used as medication for sleep. But the problem with this medication is that it's very easy to give it. Anxiety gets somewhat under control, yet you become extremely addicted to these medications. And it is quite the nightmare to stop these medications. In this paper, we were showing how people that participate of our 8-week depression recovery program, even though our program is not about decreasing benzodiazepines, a nice side effect of the program is that the person becomes aware and educated that benzodiazepines are not the best medications for them, and a dramatic decrease of their usage happens by the end of the 8 weeks. This 8 weeks depression recovery program that I'm talking about, it's a community-based program. People meet once a week for 2 hours for 8 weeks. That's what this 8-week depression recovery program consists of. And the topmost tool for physicians and scientists is called Medscape. Decided to run a nice article about our study that we presented there. also, just a week ago, a physician also that is from Iceland, Dr. Snurri, helped us to present this paper in the most important Congress of Gastroenterology. We were showing in this study how people that are depressed and at the same time have hepatitis C, when they participate of our 8-week program, their depression goes away. And this is like really good news for people with hepatitis C. See, hepatitis C is an extremely aggressive disease that attacks the liver. And the problem lies in that when somebody has hepatitis C and is depressed at the same time, there are many medications that we cannot give to those patients because those medications actually cause more depression. So you can actually drive somebody towards suicide if you were to do that. But if the person clears up their depression, that means that their therapeutic options open up and they have more possibilities of getting a thorough treatment. So this paper was presented there, and it's going to be, it's actually already published in the topmost journal of gastro, which is called Journal Gastroenterology. And I'm co-author together with some of the other lifestyle leaders of the world, such as Hans Diel, such as Eisenthal, such as Michael Greger, such as Joel Furman, and many other leaders of the lifestyle movement in this book, Rethink Food. In fact, I was just on the telephone with the editor of this book, and by the end of the program, they're going to tell you what news we have about that. But anyhow, let's dig into the topic of tonight, which is depression. And when we're dealing with depression, we're not dealing with the food or we're not dealing with the liver. We're dealing with what? With the brain. And the brain is an extremely complex organ. So complex, we still don't understand everything on it. And especially when we're dealing with depression, we need to focus on the cells that compose the brain. Those cells are called the neurons. And you know, as you and I communicate, we use words. Well, cells don't have mouths, they cannot use words. So when they communicate one to another, there is a very, very small space between each of these neurons, and instead of using words, they use chemicals. They exchange these chemicals, and in that way, communication takes place. Now, pharmaceutical companies that make medication for depression and anxiety, they have spent billions of dollars trying to understand and trying to manipulate this very, very small space. Every single medication for anxiety and depression targets that particular part of the neuron. And you know, depression is something very common. And every year we get more number of depressed people. In fact, the first records are from 1950s when they officially started to count the number of depressed people in the world. And guess what? Depression has steadily gone up and up and up. And this is very interesting because if you think about it, back in 1915 compared to our year, when did we have more options to do fun things? Today or back in 1915? See, today we have the ability with a little square about this size that I could just press a couple of buttons and I can hear the music that I want whenever I want. If you wanted to do that back in 1950, you would probably have to bring the whole orchestra to your room, isn't it? Today we have television, we have computer games, we have amusement parks, and many other things. Yet depression keeps on increasing. In fact, if you really understand the problem, you're going to realize that, in fact, the issue here is not lack of fun things to do. In fact, some of those fun things to do actually could be helping to increase the amount of depression. And in the past also, we used to find depression, and we used to call depression the disease of the Middle Ages, because it was commonly found in people around 40, 50 years, 60 years. Now, the average age for depression has decreased severely. And you know, statistics show that 1 out of 4 women will experience depression at some point of their lives. And this is a huge number. If you just go to the street and start counting women, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Extremely high the risk for depression for a woman. Among males, the risk is less. It's 1 in every 8 men, the risk for depression for males. And then there is a special subtype of depression that is called circumstantial depression. It's not exactly the same type as major depression as such. Circumstantial depression has to do with events that happen around the life of a person. And people that have 70 years, these people, 99% would have experienced this circumstantial depression at some point of their life. And that has to do with the fact that somebody that has that age has experienced a lot of losses in their life, if you really think about it. Maybe a husband died, they have lost jobs, they have lost important things that they value very much. And in fact, your ability to reach that old age has a lot to do with your ability to overcome these types of losses that unfortunately every one of us must face. And the problem with depression is that it is not located in one particular region. Everywhere in the world that you go, you find depression. Now there's an interesting pattern. Places that have the Western lifestyle are the places that have the highest depression in the world. And depression is not a cheap disease. It is expensive. Why is that? Because somebody that is depressed is not able to be so productive. Somebody that is depressed is going to miss many days of their work life. Somebody that is depressed, the relationships around that person are going to suffer. And you know, we use a book that is called the DSM. The DSM is called the Depression, the Psychology Bible, they call it. Because in that book, we find the guidelines to diagnose every single mental health problem. And in this book, we find what are the definitions of these problems. Regarding depression, the definition of this problem is that somebody needs to have 5 out of 9 symptoms, okay, for a period of at least 2 weeks. And these symptoms are different depending on the sex. For example, the first symptom of deep sadness. The symptom of deep sadness is represented differently in males and in females. For example, in females, they refer to us when they come to consultation that they are starting to cry without any cause. They say, I just started crying and I don't know why. Or there's something like really small that causes them to cry. And they say, I don't know why I'm crying. I shouldn't be crying, but I'm just starting to cry. That's the symptom in females. In males, they refer to us that symptom as feeling empty inside. Okay? They say, I feel like something is missing inside of me. I don't know what it is, but something is missing inside of me. Then we also have other important symptoms such as the change in the sleeping patterns. Change in sleeping patterns is an extremely common problem among people that are depressed. For example, they refer to us that they're waking up at 2, 3 in the morning, and what happens? They cannot by anything go back to sleep. That is a classic symptom of somebody that has low chemistry in their brain, specifically a chemical by the name of serotonin. Okay? And this is the way why those people wake up early in the morning. See, serotonin is one of those chemicals that makes you feel good when you have enough of this chemical in your brain. But the person that has depression tends to have low levels of that serotonin. And serotonin is generated when you have two important things. When you have a nutrient called tryptophan, okay? When you have that nutrient that is called tryptophan, where do you find this nutrient? You find it in things like tofu, you find it in things like flaxseed, you find it in things like black-eyed peas, this type of bean. You find it in things like gluten flour. So when you have that chemical present inside your brain, combined with bright light, that's when the brain starts generating high amounts of serotonin. That's the reason why here in Iceland, when the sun starts to go away, the number of people having bad mood increases because serotonin level starts to decrease. I used to live in Norway for many years, and how I wish I had something that you should have if you live here in Iceland, and that is a bright light. And current research shows that one of the most effective bright lights is the one that has the blue spectrum. The blue spectrum is the one that has the beneficial side of the light. Full spectrum will also work, but the blue light is specifically what is stimulating the brain to generate that serotonin. And unfortunately, these lights, artificial lights that we have inside, they don't have enough power to generate that serotonin. So, if you live in Iceland, I would highly suggest you, even if you don't have depression, to have one of those bright lights, and every morning, within 10 minutes, that's what studies show, within 10 minutes of waking up, you should turn on your bright light and expose yourself within those 10 minutes from 15 to 30 minutes of that bright light. That's going to help you have a very good day. So let's get back again to the problem of sleep. We said that somebody that is waking up early in the night and is not able to go back to sleep, his problem is serotonin. How come? This is the way it works. The amount of serotonin that you have in your brain at night, in complete darkness, that serotonin is converted into another chemical that is called melatonin. And melatonin is what helps you to have good quality deep sleep. So if somebody has little melatonin, what happens? Little serotonin is going to have little melatonin, and their sleep will tend to be more superficial. Or they will actually have trouble going to sleep because there's that lack of melatonin. So bright light in the day, darkness at night. Beware of this, because especially here in Iceland with so many computers and cell phones, studies show that the bright light of your cell phone actually can block your melatonin. So it is an extremely bad habit to be checking your cell phone or be using your computer at night. Now, what are you going to do if you really need to do that? Well, unfortunately, there's people that have thought about this issue and they have come up with some bright solutions. For example, if you use a computer, you can install a free program that is called F as in Frank, Lux, L-U-X. You can Google it and you will find it free online. F-Lux, you install in your computer, you tell this program where in the world you are, and the program will know what time sunset comes in. And what it does, it blocks the blue light. Remember we're talking about the blue light? It blocks the blue light of the device so the device is not so stimulated. And if you have one of those smartphones, there are programs like those for your cell phone so that you can block that blue light so that it doesn't interfere too much with your sleep. Now, sleeping problems can actually be both extremes. So, you can have the sleeping problem that it is short, or you can actually have sleeping problem the opposite. You sleep too much. Both would qualify as a symptom for matters of qualifying for depression. So, too much sleep or not enough sleep. In our program, we also have a 10-day intensive depression recovery program that we run in California. In that program, often we get people, for example, that are sleeping about 16 hours a day. Imagine that. And you know what? They wake up after 16 hours of sleep and they still are tired. Why is that? Because that serotonin level is not the best. So, we may be mean, or I don't know what you want to call us, but in our residential program, we have the key of every single one of our participants. And if somebody doesn't sleep well at night, even if they don't sleep good at night, in the morning, especially the people that are coming to the program, as the program is starting the first few days, we go and knock on their door. And if they don't open, we actually go and open the door. Okay? What are we going to do? We're going to have what? A blue light. Why is that? Because that person needs blue light. That person needs to segregate serotonin, so that will make him feel better throughout the whole day. We will increase their serotonin, and if I increase serotonin, what do I increase? Melatonin, and in that way, they're going to have a good night afterwards. See, sleeping the whole morning is not the best because you interfere with your internal rhythms. And then the body doesn't know when is night, when is day, so it is better to follow a normal, good program. Also, another symptom of depression, very common symptom, is the symptom of fatigue. In fact, this is one of the reasons why people come to our clinic to see us. They say, I don't know what is wrong with me, but I'm so tired that I don't know what to do. I just came back from vacation, I tried to take it easy, and still I have a tiredness that it won't go away with anything. So they come for a consultation, and as we start examining and asking the questions, immediately we start finding, boom, these symptoms are symptoms, and we find those 5 symptoms, and we're able to diagnose with depression. Also, a very common problem, the problem of morbid thoughts. Morbid thoughts mean that the person thinks a lot about disease, thinks a lot about death, thinks about harming others, thinks about harming themselves. Okay? That's what is called morbid thoughts. And you can see, as a society, a reflection of how common depression is, if you are observant. If you are observant, you're going to see what type of design many shirts have. Little skull. Have you seen that? What about the skateboards? Skulls. What about the surfboards? Skulls. You go to the art gallery, what do you see? Symbols of death. See, those are a reflection of the amount of depression that we are facing. And many times, people can put actually a mask. You may not think that they are depressed, but inside of them, they know very well that they are depressed. And whenever you go and try to find help, you need to be honest in order to receive the help that you need. I remember very well a consultation that we had. We had a couple that came to see us. And the man sit down in front of us, and behind him, he couldn't see her, was his wife. And we started asking them the symptoms of depression. You know, are you more irritable than usual? And he would say no. But the wife would say, yes. Have you been gaining weight recently, changing your weight? No. And the wife said, yes. And you know, after 3 or 4 questions, we had to stop the interview and say, wait. Somebody here is telling us lies, somebody here is telling us the truth. And sure enough, immediately the wife started saying, look, it's true what the doctor is saying. The other day, blah, 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 and the other day, blah, blah, blah. He clearly had those symptoms, and he was not recognizing the issue. So, make sure that you're familiarized with these symptoms, and there is a sub-classification if the person only has 2 to 4 of these symptoms in a period of 2 weeks. That's what we call it's a less severe depression, or subsyndromal depression, we call it medically speaking. And this is not as marked the symptoms, but still the problem is there. They're not completely well, but they're not completely sick. Somewhere there in the middle. And one of the problems of depression is that it increases the risk of dying. If you were to go and check the records of the causes of death here in Iceland, you're going to find out that every one of these diseases are the most common causes of death in Iceland. And that's the problem. Depression decreases longevity. The quality of life decreases, and the person is at risk of dying in a faster way. And what about suicide? See, I was shocked when I went to New Zealand. In New Zealand, suicide is the second cause of death in the country. Extremely, extremely high. And you know, there was a very interesting study that was done in San Francisco. If you have ever been to San Francisco or saw the pictures, the classic landmark of San Francisco is that beautiful Golden Gate Bridge. And you know, unfortunately, that is one of the favorite spots of people that want to commit suicide. And what they do is that they just stop the car in the middle of the bridge and jump, and it is quite long the fall there. But you know, believe it or not, there are people that have survived such jump. They have injured themselves quite a bit, you know, head injury, bones, etc., etc. So a very smart researcher went ahead and found the people that had survived this attempt of suicide. And you know, he asked very interesting questions. The first question that he asked is, okay, looks like you wanted to commit suicide, isn't it? And what did they answer? Yes or no? Yes, I wanted to commit suicide. And then he asked a very interesting follow-up question. Are you glad that you were not able to commit your attempt of suicide? What was the answer? Yes, I'm very glad that I'm still alive and my goal of committing suicide did not happen. So then the research asked an even interesting question. So, you told me that you wanted to commit suicide, but now you're telling me that you're glad that you didn't commit suicide. When did you change your mind about this? What was the answer? As soon as my feet left solid ground, I realized this was the biggest mistake of my life. And see, this is the problem with depression. Depression increases impulsivity. The person does things without really thinking well about it. And if you saw on the symptoms of depression, the challenge of lack of concentration, the part of the brain that helps you make decisions is not working properly. And many times the person gets a new credit card and he just goes on a shopping spree, buying this and that, and then they realize that that was not a good idea because depression increases impulsivity. So beware when somebody tells you, look, I'm going to commit suicide and this is the way I'm going to do it. Take that very seriously. That person needs professional help as soon as possible because there is a high probability that they're going to end up doing. And see, depression not only affects the mind, depression affects many aspects of the person. There are studies that show that things like chronic headaches, many times, not all the time I'm saying, but many times there is an underlying depression. Things like chronic backaches, things like abdominal issues. As you start examining the patient and asking the right questions, you will find out that depression is an underlying problem. And also things like the immune system suffer as a result of this. Because there is a new science that is called neuropsychoimmunology. In other words, the connection between your immune system and your mood. Whenever your mood is down, the immune system doesn't work properly. Whenever you're happy and glad, the immune system is working at its maximum level. That's why, as immunity decreases, things like asthma can go ahead and increase. And what is one of the most common treatments for depression? As soon as you say that, medication comes to mind. But you know, statistics show that only about 20% of the people really feel that they are healed after taking those antidepressive medications. And unfortunately, those medications many times have some nasty side effects. And that's why, as the diarrhea comes, as the headache comes, and so forth, the secondary effects of the medication start to come, the person says, forget it, I don't want to take this. This doesn't make me feel good. Or it interferes with the normal function of the brain. And the person in consultation comes and tells us, you know, I don't like this medication because it doesn't make me feel correctly. They tell us, I go to a funeral and I don't know what's wrong with me. I cannot cry. I cannot express my feelings correctly. And that has to do with the fact that the medication is manipulating that brain chemistry in the brain. So many times, the people drop the medication in the middle of the treatment, and in that way, they end up without any help for their problem. So there must be another solution. And what I've noticed is that if you're taking medication, you should never stop the medication, especially the one for depression, by yourself. Why is that? If you stop the medication for depression suddenly, your mood can go down very fast, and you're gonna feel absolutely horrible. So anytime you're taking medication for depression and you want to stop it, you have to talk to a professional in health so that they can give you a roadmap and a plan to decrease that medication. Depending on the type of medication is the type of rules that you follow, and as you decrease medication, in that way you're able to feel much better. And you know, the guidelines for one of the most common types of medications that we use for depression is that young people especially shouldn't be put in these medications, because these medications can actually increase the risk of suicide among young people. So beware of that. Guidelines, for example, this one from England, they show that it is better if the person that is young tries to find some other alternative type of medication. And this is the way that our program came about. It was an article that came in one of the most important publications for internal medicine, a publication called the Archives of Internal Medicine. In that article, it said that 1 out of every 3 people that came to an internal medicine doctor, the problem was not that headache, that back pain, but in reality, it was an underlying depression. And you know, the physician that I work with, he is the author of this program. He started to think this is probably not true. So when we started checking the population of patients that we had, we actually found a quite similar number among our population of patients that we were not aware of. And after researching the scientific literature, this is when we came about with the Depression Recovery Program, in which we were able to pinpoint the causes of the depression. And remember the article I told you to Google, the Netley hypothesis? In that article, we tell you with detail what each one of what we call the hits qualifies for this. Now, let me tell you what is the good news of our hypothesis. In our hypothesis, there are 10 causes of depression. First cause is the genetic cause. And see, the genetic cause has to do with people that have a family that have depression. For example, father, grandparents have depression. The person has a higher risk of developing depression. But see, this is the good news. In order to have depression, according to our hypothesis, according to our idea, you need to have 4 or more of these 10 causes, a very strong genetic cause of depression, yet that doesn't mean you're going to have depression. You need to have 4 or more of these causes. Then we have the developmental hit. The developmental hit has to do with the way that you grew up. And what would qualify as developmental? Every one of these things in parentheses is based on a scientific study that was published by some major university. Developmental hit would be qualified in females that have their first menstrual period too early in life. What's too early in life? Under 11 years of age. Okay. That in parentheses is something very common. In the journal Pediatrics a few years ago, there was a major article showing what they call an epidemic of early menstrual periods. The average age was being at 8 and 7, And this actually causes many social problems. Why is that? Because here you have somebody with a body of a full-grown female with a brain of a little child. Not the best combination, isn't it? And unplanned pregnancies and so forth increase when you have this combination. But when the brain of the female develops so fast, it starts to bathe in these estrogens and different hormones, and that increases the risk of depression, and not only of depression, but those females also have an increased risk of breast cancer according to the research. What else would qualify as developmental hit? Somebody that has suffered any type of abuse while they were small. Okay? So also is something common today in our society due to the fact of things like drug use and alcoholism. These type of homes, very prone to different types of abuse. And also, it would qualify as developmental hit, somebody that grew up eating too much animal protein during their developmental years. Studies show that those people actually have an increased risk of depression. Then we have the lifestyle hit. Lifestyle hit is related to the health habits of the person. For example, somebody that doesn't have a regular exercise program. You should have a regular exercise program in which at least 5 times a week you do exercise that causes deep breathing for at least half an hour. Also, among developmental hit, it would qualify somebody that is not being exposed to bright light on a regular basis. And if you notice, this is a big part of our society today. You know? In the old days, our ancestors, some of them were fishermen, and they were in the sunlight as they were going in their boats, or many of our ancestors work in farms. And the farmer knew very well that as the day increases during the day, the midday is when you have the highest level of heat in the day. Therefore, most of your ancestors, very early in the morning, that's when they were working on their fields. And as they were working in their fields early in the morning, they were getting that nice bright light that would help them feel good throughout the day. But what happened today? Today we have changed completely everything. And now we have people living in places where there's not much light, it's artificial light. And then what they do, they go out quickly and quickly get to their job, and they don't have time to expose themselves to bright light. So people that don't expose themselves regularly to bright light would also qualify as lifestyle hit. What other thing would qualify? Not breathing correctly. And this has to do with things like having a bad posture. If you have a bad posture, the lungs cannot expand completely and they cannot bring that oxygen. What's the logic behind this? A brain that does not have enough oxygen is a brain that is not going to work very efficiently. So any of those three would qualify as lifestyle hit. What are we going to do about this? Very simple. Program your exercise early in the day. So make sure that you log in your exercise early in the day. In that way, you get your exercise, you get your bright light, and you get your oxygen, and you will start your day with the right way. Then, very common problem, the circadian problem. The circadian has to do with the internal rhythms of your body. And if you have a disorder in your life, the brain will suffer as a result of that. And this is something very interesting because we have developed a test. It's an 85-question test that people fill it out. And that test tells us which hits you have active at this moment. And among those hits, this is one of the most popular hits that you'll find. And why is that? Because of the way that society works today. People come out of work and then there's so many things that are entertaining. And many times, instead of going to bed on time, what are they doing? They're in their Facebook, they're clicking. Or they're watching television late at night. And that disorder that you create, the brain doesn't like that. Your brain likes regularity. Every day you should wake up and go to bed at the same time. And in parentheses, including the weekends. Okay? That's exactly where the challenge happens. The person says, oh, I'm so tired, I need to stay in bed the whole Saturday morning. And that modifies your internal rhythms. That's why the famous Blue Monday, have you heard about that? Well, you don't have it here in Iceland. When Monday comes, nobody wants to go to work. They feel horrible. Why is that? They were violating their normal patterns of the week in the weekend. So what's the solution? Follow a similar program on the weekends to the program that you have during the weeks. So that will qualify as a circadian, not having order in your sleeping habits, and also not eating at regular times. You should eat every day also at the same time. And then one of the most important hits is the hit of the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is the frontal part of your brain. And see, if you were to do an imaging study in which you could show activity, for example, a SPECT scan or a PET scan that can actually read the activity of the brain, you will see that somebody that is depressed has low activity in the frontal lobe. That's the physiological response. And this was an issue. What came first? Is low activity in the brain causing depression, or somebody that is depressed causes low activity in the frontal lobe? There's a researcher that has done very nice studies on this. His last name is Dr. Dravets. And his proposal is that the low activity of the brain, of the frontal lobe, actually it's causing the depression. And what would qualify for that frontal lobe problem? Qualifying for that frontal lobe would be people that don't have, on an average, abstract thinking. What do you do with abstract thinking? Well, if you're like in the field of mathematics and physics, and you're doing calculus and differential equations and so forth, you're using abstract thinking, But the average person does not do abstract thinking on a regular basis. And that can be a little bit concerning. So what we suggest people to do is to read Proverbs. Whenever you interpret a proverb, you need to use the frontal lobe in order to understand that proverb. And this is something very interesting. You can actually see the maturity of the frontal lobe by asking children to help you interpret a proverb. If you notice, the frontal lobe is developed all the way till you are 25 years of age. Okay? And that's the reason why sometimes teenagers make some decisions. They say, why do you do that? Because the frontal lobe is not very well developed. And the frontal lobe is where you have your will. The frontal lobe is also where you have your judgment. And the frontal lobe is also where you have your conscience. So that's also another hit for the frontal lobe. Somebody that is doing things that go against their current value, they know it's wrong and they're doing it, that will qualify as a frontal lobe hit. Also, we have another important hit, and that is the hit of nutrition. The hit of nutrition has to do with people that is not having the right diet. And this makes all the sense of the world, isn't it? If you're not eating the right food, how can you make the right neurochemistry? And this is the challenge with this hit. Nutrition hit has to do with somebody that is on a high refined carbohydrate diet. Nutrition hit would qualify also somebody following one of these unfortunately common high protein diets. Research shows those people are more prone to depression. Also, lack of vitamin 6, vitamin B12, iron, and folate. Those would qualify also for nutrition hint. And also somebody that does not have enough intake of omega-3 fatty acid. There's a reason why these acids are called essential acids, because you need to have those acids present in order for the brain to work properly. So that would be the nutrition hit. So if you're interested about exploring further these hits, I recommend you to read that article. I'll repeat it again. Just Google the word Nedley and hypothesis. Nedley hypothesis. We are expanding on each one of these hits. The only exception of the 4 hits, remember we said you need to have 4 of these hits at the same time. The only exception of the rule is here in medical condition. Medical condition is somebody that has a certain type of medical problem that it is not currently under control. A very common problem in the Western world, and in fact there's research behind this that show that it is the lifestyle of the person causing most of these problems. I'm talking about the thyroid issue, an extremely common medical problem. When the thyroid is out of control, either too much or too little, secondarily the brain cannot work properly, and by itself the medical hit can cause a depression. What other medical problem would qualify for that medical hit? Diabetes. Diabetes that is not under control will secondarily give that medical hit. Also, people that have an autoimmune problem that is not under control, that would qualify also. And also problems of the liver, like the hepatitis C that we were mentioning. Somebody that has that hepatitis by itself could cause depression unless the problem is under control. So, as you can see, there are many causes of depression, but there is hope because you can make changes. In closing, I want to share with you some of our latest data on how effective our depression recovery program is. And this is the statistic of about how many people are participating in our program. We have a wide variety of people from all over the world that participate in our program. And this is a pattern that is interesting to me because I've seen with my 20 years of experience in working in these lifestyle centers, this is the pattern that I have seen. Usually it's 3/4 females and about 1/4 males. And why is that? Has to do with a little bit of the stubbornness of the male. It's the reality. What I notice is that sometimes the female starts to feel bad and they go and seek help. And usually males are a little bit more reluctant to go and seek help. In fact, many times at the lifestyle center, the male comes, but that's because the wife brought it by the ear. That's the reason why they end up there. So this is something important. If you have a problem, you should go and seek some help. And this is the statistics that show what happened. We're dealing with our 8-week depression recovery program data here. Here we're showing that the average person that comes to our depression program has actually moderate disease. And at the end of the 8 weeks, they move to non-depression. And the same thing happens with anxiety. They have a mild anxiety on average and they move down. And then we have also, this is the way that of the levels of depression that we start with. If you notice, we have the severe there on the top left side of things. But look at what happens at the end of the program. This is before. The blue one is the none. See how it increases dramatically, the none? And usually most of the people move to a lower category. This is regarding the anxiety. This is regarding the hits, Regarding the hits, we can see how these are each one of those hits that we were mentioning. Genetic, developmental, lifestyle, circadian, nutrition, toxins, addictions, social, medical, and frontal lobe. ¿Me puedes traer una batería, por favor? And we can see how the most common hits are the lifestyle hits and circadian rhythm hits, and also the frontal lobe hit. Very, very common hits. But this is what happened by the end of the 8-week program. And this is percentage of improvement. So as you can see, things like nutrition decrease dramatically. And also lifestyle and circadian, of the person is more aware about having to put order in their lives. They make the effort and they go ahead and improve. And then also, you can see here how things move very nicely. For example, somebody that has severe depression, as you can see, 95% of the people that have severe depression improve. And this is fantastic. As I was doing this research, I started looking in the scientific literature to try to find what other treatments are there that have this effectiveness. And this is what I found. There is an experimental drug for depression. They use it in anesthesia, but this is being used experimentally for depression. And this drug is called ketamine. And ketamine will actually decrease depression within minutes. As you're applying this drug, depression is going away. Yet, it is not actually a good solution of the problem, because ketamine is an extremely addictive substance. In fact, they use it as an illegal drug on the streets. They call it the Special K. That's the name that they give to this drug in the streets. And also, this drug tends to damage the memory of the person, which is not a very good thing to do, to damage the memory. So definitely that's not a good option. Also, something that has a similar response rate is the treatment with shock therapy. You put this electricity on the brain. Unfortunately, research showed that this may not be one of the best solutions due to the possible secondary effects that these can have, such as harming the brain, especially the memory banks get damaged. But as you can see, the beauty of our treatment is that it matters more the lifestyle that you're having. Every one of those 8 hits that we were going through, those 8 hits that you can modify, those hits have to do with the choices that you make. So the responsibility comes to you to be able to choose in the right way. What other thing we see here in this chart? We see some people that are same as the beginning, and finally we have no improvement in 3% of them. And what we notice on the people that are not improving, as we interview them to try to find out what's wrong, how come these people didn't improve, those are the people that refuse to do the lifestyle changes. So if we tell them, go and do exercise, and they don't do the exercise, go and expose yourself to bright light, they don't want to expose themselves to bright light, how can we expect them to improve? So, as you can see, we are dealing with the real causes of depression, and as you deal with those real causes of depression, then there is definitely hope for depression. So, I hope that I have shown you a little bit about our depression program. Our depression program is actually an 8-week program. So I invite you to come tomorrow to the next lecture. We'll be exploring the different treatments that we can do for depression. Tomorrow we're going to be dealing more with the lifestyle hit. And I'm going to show you some of the most powerful research that is coming about how actually when you change your lifestyle, you actually start to change your genes. It makes changes at the level of the genes. So don't miss tomorrow's night presentation, in which we will be dealing with the lifestyle hit. So if anybody has a question right now, there's a possibility to do a couple of questions. If anybody has a question, I'll be happy to